Republican Charlie Crist ran for governor of Florida the usual way. For example, by eating possum at the local Eating Possum Festival, by shaking a lot of hands. Charlie Crist knew Florida, and he knew Florida politics right down to the last rescued loggerhead sea turtle. Charlie Crist was a moderate Republican and a proud member of the reality-based community as a Republican. And as Florida governors go, Governor Crist was exceedingly popular. He carried approval ratings of over 50% and almost 70% within his own Republican Party. But then something happened to Florida Governor Charlie Crist. Specifically, something happened to his career. In February 2009, in the worst of the economic crisis, with the nation shedding hundreds of thousands of jobs, Governor Charlie Crist physically hugged, the newly inaugurated Democratic president. He hugged President Obama at an event in Fort Myers, and he said that President Obama's economic stimulus plan was going to be good for Florida and good for the country. A few months after he hugged President Obama, Mr. Crist announced that instead of running again for governor, he was going to make a bid for the United States Senate. At the time, the idea was to keep a Republican in that Senate seat, a Senate seat that was opening up where the Republican incumbent wasn't going to run again. Charlie Crist was popular, so he presumably could do that. He could hold that seat for the party. He jumped into the Republican primary only to find that he was running there against Florida House Speaker Marco Rubio, who was an anti-stimulus Tea Party candidate. Marco Rubio and his supporters just wailed away on Charlie Crist for the hugging and for the stimulus. And it worked. Mr. Crist dropped out of the Republican primary rather than get walloped by Marco Rubio. He stayed in the race as an independent, but then in the general election, he got walloped by Mr. Rubio, and Mr. Rubio went on to take that Senate seat. And that was how popular Florida Governor Charlie Crist got effectively purged from the Republican Party. This is how his demise was explained, right? The hug that doomed Crist's Senate bid. Charlie Crist, you embraced the Democrat. Get out of the party. You are done. That's how the story has been told. But maybe there is something else about Charlie Crist and what happened to him that is important to his legacy but has mostly been forgotten. Now that former Governor Crist is back around, now that he's no longer just that guy who got run out of the Republican Party, now that Charlie Crist is also the leading independent speaking on behalf of President Obama at the Democratic Convention, now that Charlie Crist is being mentioned as a top contender, if not the top contender, to replace the deeply unpopular new Republican governor of Florida, Rick Scott, to get his old job back, maybe as an independent, maybe even as a Democrat. Now that all that is going on in Charlie Crist's afterlife, I guess, another story has been percolating in the Florida press to which some attention should be paid. This year, for this election, Florida Republicans cut the days for early voting almost by half, right? You've seen these pictures in our coverage of what happened in this election. When the lines stretched from dawn until dawn, Florida Democrats and the League of Women Voters, they asked Governor Rick Scott to please extend the time for early voting by one day. Governor Rick Scott said, no, let the people stand in line. Now, Florida had seen this kind of problem before. Back in 2008, when Charlie Crist was governor, Governor Crist extended early voting. He saw those long lines of Florida voters then, and he extended early voting. And it was with a boost from early voting that Barack Obama won Florida and ultimately won the White House. The common wisdom is that Charlie Crist got purged out of the Republican Party for the crime of hugging President Obama and supporting the stimulus as good for Florida, right? But maybe the story goes further back than that. Just before the election, MSNBC's Joy Reid reported this to us from South Florida, just before the election.
Actually, you talked about Charlie Crist, Rachel, earlier, and the fact that he did sign that executive order extending voting hours. That was the beginning of the end of Charlie Crist's tenure in the Republican Party. It was the beginning of the rupture with his party because Republicans in the state blamed Crist for Barack Obama winning the state.
In that other, less told, maybe scarcely remembered version of the story, Republicans told themselves that maybe it was Charlie Crist who cost their party the state of Florida in 2008. When he allowed that early voting, maybe that was traitorous to the party. Well, this year, as the state's debacle by design, debacle on purpose election unfolded with those 5, 6, 7, 8-hour lines, a former chair of the Florida Republican Party has been telling reporters that Republicans cut early voting for this election not out of concerns about voter fraud, like they said, but rather for the hidden purpose of suppressing Democratic voters so Democrats could win the election. When the former Republican Party chairman says that, Florida Republicans now respond, well, don't listen to that guy. He's not a reliable source. He's under indictment for stealing money from the party. And so he is. But now the story is getting more interesting because now more sources are coming forward. Another source, an anonymous Republican consultant, telling the Palm Beach Post that Florida Republicans specifically wanted to cut down on turnout by African American voters. That's an anonymous source, so fair warning, grain of salt, etc. But hey, wait, here's another name that is one that you'll recognize. Former Florida Republican Governor Charlie Crist, telling the Palm Beach Post that the Republican Party asked him when he was governor to reduce early voting so they could cut the Democratic turnout. Quoting the Palm Beach Post, Crist said in a telephone interview this month that he did not recall conversations about early voting specifically targeting black voters, but he said it looked to me like that was what was being suggested, and I didn't want them to go there at all. Wow. I mean, wow, with all the caveats about Charlie Crist being in the Republican doghouse and maybe running as an independent or a Democrat and so on, but wow, right? I mean, at this point, with what just happened in Florida, Charlie Crist is a man with a story to tell. Charlie Crist is maybe a man more than any other in Florida who has a story that we should all be listening to him tell. And Charlie Crist joins us for the interview next.